Hi friends, I hope you're all doing well. Today is actually Thanksgiving and I figured what better time to do my November reading wrap up than before I go and eat some turkey and mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce. What's your guys' favorite Thanksgiving dish? I love cranberry sauce, but like the kind in the can that is like round, you know? But yeah, I've got family stuff going on today and tomorrow, and I want to get this video up on Saturday morning, so I figured that this was the best time to do it. Are we crooked here? I decided this month to go pedal to the metal, fully step on the gas, and I participated in Nonfiction November. So all of the books except for one that I'm going to be talking about today are nonfiction. So yeah, there have been some other themed months, like August is Women in Translation Month, and September is like the Shorty September challenge thing. And I made like recommendation videos for those months, but I didn't necessarily participate in like actively trying to read translated books or short books, just because I had like other things planned out that I'd wanted to tackle. But for November, I was like, let me just fully dive into this. Let's check some nonfiction books off of the physical TBR, and then I also had some books on NetGalley that I wanted to get to as well. So yeah, I'm really happy with that kind of push towards nonfiction. I've been talking in a lot of videos about how I wanted to up my count of nonfiction books for the year, and I feel like this has definitely helped me with that. I know not everyone is like super into nonfiction, so maybe that seems crazy to just read nonfiction for the month, but I enjoyed it. So yeah, if you are a fan of literary fiction, memoirs, essay collections, you should definitely subscribe, leave a comment, let me know your thoughts on these books. Let me know if you read anything interesting for Nonfiction November. I would love to chat with you. And we're just gonna get right into the Storygraph stats for November. So I read 8 books. I am hoping that that changes to 9. I still have, you know, a little bit more time in the month. So I do plan on reading Salvage by Dion Brand, which is an essay collection. If I finish that before this video needs uploaded, I will add in like another clip at the very end of me talking about it. If not, then we'll talk about it at the end of December. But yes, so far 8 books, which comes out to 2,475 pages. And we had an 88% nonfiction versus 12% fiction split. 5 of the books were books that I had purchased and already owned. 2 were from NetGalley, and 1 was a physical ARC sent to me by the publisher. So let's get into the very first book. This one was a NetGalley read, and it was Didion and Babitz by Lili Anolik. And I rated this book 3 stars. I was disappointed by this one, you guys, and I've seen a lot of other people have the same thoughts as me on it, so that makes me feel a little bit less alone. But I was actually planning on doing like a whole in-depth video comparing this book to another nonfiction book, The World According to Joan Didion, and just talking about Joan Didion and Eve Babitz and these 2 books about them. But that ended up not happening because I just did not have a good time with Didion and Babitz. In my opinion, I think that the book should just be named Babitz. And like, I get what Anolik was trying to do. So much has been written and said about Joan Didion, and Eve Babitz has only just very recently, in like the last decade, kind of come into that same sort of literary prominence as Joan. But oh my gosh, I feel like Joan Didion is only brought into this book to be like dragged down and to make Eve look good, if that makes sense. If you don't know what this book is about, it is looking at the relationship between 2 authors from the LA scene in the 60s and 70s, Joan Didion and Eve Babitz. They are both kind of these like cool it girl authors, I think they're kind of like a symbol for a lot of readers online today. They've been compared to each other very often because they're both from the same place and they were both kind of writing about similar crowds of people and similar experiences. And in this book, Anolik is exploring the relationship that they had because they did actually know each other and kind of work together. Joan is actually kind of responsible for getting Eve's career off the ground and getting her published at first. So yeah, it's just looking at both of these women and their careers and their relationship together. But as I was saying, I feel like it is more, let's make Eve Babitz look really good and let's kind of tear down Joan Didion, and I just didn't love that approach. I think that she's really kind of villainizing Joan for taking a different approach to her writing than what Eve did. Joan was more disciplined and just took kind of a more like serious, regimented approach to her writing than Eve did. And I don't know, like I haven't read very much Eve Babitz, I will admit. I've only read Eve's Hollywood, which was her first published book. I've read quite a bit more from Didion, but she's not like my favorite author of all time. She's one of my most read, but I haven't had like 5-star experiences across the board with her books. So I don't know, maybe I'm not the best person to like speak on it, but I almost just question the need to compare both of the authors. Like, yes, they were in the same place at the same time, but I think that their approaches and their goals with their writing careers were just so different. And I don't know, like I get why people compare them, but for me, they're kind of in different categories. So yeah, Lily Anolik sides with Eve Babitz. She makes this declaration in the book that she is on Eve's side and Eve is her favorite, and that's great. We all have our preferences, but in like a serious nonfiction book about both of the authors, that kind of choosing of sides just made the book lose a lot of credibility for me. I don't think that you as a reader get a full chance to form your own opinion about both of the women because there's just so much bias towards Eve. I found it to be really unbalanced. Like the title of the book and the cover of the book really shows like this half and half between Didion and Babitz, and it should be more like 75% Babitz, 25% Didion. Yeah, I just think it's a shame because what we did hear about their relationship seemed very interesting, and just like the dynamic between the two of them and this kind of sense of mentorship but also competition. I thought that that was super interesting, and I just wish that it was executed a little bit better. And yeah, I don't know, I just wish that we had seen kind of more from Joan's perspective to truly get both sides of the story. And the funny thing is too, like even though the book sides with Eve, I don't necessarily think that it paints her in that great of a light, which is kind of strange to me. It feels really gossipy. Anolik interviewed a lot of people that were loosely involved in this Franklin Avenue scene in California. And they would talk about Eve's sex life and her drug use. There's a lot of speculation about Joan Didion's marriage and her husband's sexuality, which felt really gross to me that they were all bringing that up and questioning it so hard. I don't know, it just felt kind of icky to me. I didn't like that discussion. I also feel like the tone that Anolik takes is condescending a lot of the time. She does this kind of thing where she like addresses the reader. So she'll be like, "Dear reader, this is what I think." And it's like, it just got old after the first couple instances of it. And I ended up just taking such a long time to finish this. It should not have taken me as long to finish as it did. So yeah, some like quick positives. I liked how she went chronologically through the lives of both writers and kind of weaved their lives together at like the same points in time. I also really liked getting an insight into Eve's letters and the conversations that Lily Anolik had with her. Eve was like kind of a primary source for this book because her and Anolik had a like interviewer, interviewee kind of conversational relationship with each other. So that was cool. She also talks to Eve's sister. So I thought that those were like really great sources and really interesting to hear from both of them. And I mean, I love to see that Eve is getting recognition. That's super cool. So like, love that. Nothing against her. It was just the tone and the style of this book that didn't work for me. But nonetheless, thank you to Scribner and NetGalley for sending me a digital copy of this book to read. Number 2, Shame by Annie Ernaux. This was another 3-star read for me. We kind of got off to a bit of a slow start here as far as like great books. But yeah, this is another little tiny baby book by Annie Ernaux, and I feel like this is really just another thread in the tapestry that Annie Ernaux has been weaving of all of these different themes in her books. This focuses in on a traumatic event that happened during Ernaux's childhood where her father attempted to kill her mother. That is not a spoiler, it's on the back of the book. But she looks at that incident and then examines the ways that it affected her life. In particular, she takes a really in-depth look at the neighborhood that she grew up in and the school that she went to. She was 12 years old when this happened. It was 1952. She takes a look at religion and education and just this like small town life that she was a part of as a child. And a lot of the observations and descriptions that she puts forth in this book reminded me kind of another book of hers called Exteriors, which was just like a bunch of observations and like people watching pretty much. It feels like both of those books are a like snapshot of the outside world, whereas a lot of other Ernaux books are more of a portrait of like her internal life. This one felt very externally focused to me, which was kind of different. And because of that kind of zoomed out look, I think that that was the reason why this didn't work as well for me as some of her other books. I think that Ernaux really is just at her best when she is talking about the personal, and it's like interesting because the inciting event for this book, like her dad trying to kill her mom, like that is a very personal and relationship based thing, but that's really not the main focus of this book. So yeah, this one wasn't my favorite, but I'm never going to be mad about reading an Annie Ernaux book. I just think that she is so talented, and I love watching her kind of put all of the pieces of her life together through these short little memoirs that she does. The prose in this book was sharp and sparse, as it always is with her. I was able to finish it in one day, and yeah, it just adds another dimension to the Annie Ernaux cinematic universe, if you will allow me to use that phrase. Things did start picking up after those first 2 books. We did finally get to a 5-star read, which is The Collected Schizophrenias by Esme Weijun Wang. This was such an incredible essay collection, you guys. There is nothing that I love more than just a really well-written, well-researched essay collection, and I feel like I haven't read one of those in a while, but this checked all of the boxes for me personally. This is a mixture of personal writing about the author's own experience with schizoaffective disorder, and there's also a lot of research into the history, the treatment, and the perception of the group of mental illnesses that are known as the collected schizophrenias. She goes into the different symptoms and kind of the things that differentiate between the illnesses in this group in the beginning of the book. So I found this just to be so insightful, as well as I think really unique. I've read quite a few accounts of different women's experiences being institutionalized for mental illness, but none of the books have specifically been about schizoaffective disorder, and it's a disease that is just so like mischaracterized and even villainized by the media. So I just thought that this was super eye-opening. The author talks about her time as a student at Yale University, and that was, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, like one of the first times that she kind of experienced a full breakdown because of her disease. And the university just mishandled her case so extremely poorly, like just completely mistreated her and did not give her any compassion or grace in that situation. She also talks about trauma and chronic illness and how those experiences can compound the negative effects of schizoaffective disorder and just kind of turn everything up to a 10 and come together to make things worse. And she also talks about her connection to spirituality and some different like links between mental illness and spirituality, which I haven't really read much about, and I thought that was a really unique essay in this collection. I thought that her writing style was very frank and to the point, and it really did kind of take this difficult topic and it made it really engaging and just provided a fresh perspective that's usually overlooked. So I really got along with the writing style in here. And yeah, I just came out of this book feeling like I truly learned something, and I was just so in awe of Esme's resilience and poise in the face of schizoaffective disorder. She writes about it with so much clarity. I just think that there's something really special about essay collections that strike that balance between the personal and like the educational kind of big picture. And I was just really enthralled by this, so I highly recommend it if it sounds interesting to you. And then we had our reread for the month, which was Crying in Mart by Michelle Zauner. I have an entire reading vlog on this where I go into all of my thoughts, so I'm really not going to linger on this one too long, but I read this book for the first time back in 2021 and rated it 5 stars. I just reread it and I would rate it 6 stars now if I could. I loved this somehow even more. If you're not aware of this book, it is Michelle Zauner's account of her mother's battle with cancer and her grief after her mother passes away. Michelle is the leader of the band Japanese Breakfast, but you don't need to be familiar with the music to get something out of this book. I think that it really stands on its own. I was absolutely devastated by this book both times that I read it. And yeah, I almost cry in the vlog. I talk about all of the heart-wrenching things in here, but this book, I think it was super hyped whenever it was first released in 2021, and I was kind of worried that it wasn't going to live up to that hype or live up to my first experience, but I think there's a reason why so many people love this. It's because it is just a really fantastically written, moving picture of grief. And yeah, I think that it deserves all of the praise that it has gotten over the past couple of years. And I would probably say that this is my favorite memoir of all time. A lot of people have been asking me for like a favorite books of all time video, and this one is going to be in there. Just you wait and see. After that, I returned to another essay collection that I received on NetGalley, and that was The Abandoners on Mothers and Monsters by Begoña Urzaiz, I think is how you pronounce her name. This was a 4-star read for me. It's another essay collection that just really checks all of the boxes of what I love. The author asks the question, what kind of mother abandons her child in this book? And then she outlines the various social, economic, cultural reasons why this happens. And it's not really a common phenomenon. Maybe it's a bit more common than is like publicized, but yeah, she pulls in all of these really interesting female figures, some of them from literature, some of them from film, music, and then she also does get a kind of everyday person perspective from a group of mothers in Spain. And she writes about her own experience with motherhood as well. I believe she has 2 sons, so she kind of gives her own perspective on all of these women's situations. This was a book where I was really unfamiliar with, I think most, if not all, of the situations that the author was talking about. So this was another example of a book that I feel like it really taught me a lot. Just like the collected Schizophrenias, I wasn't familiar with the subject matter here. And that subject matter is like such a gray area. Like it's a very sticky situation and difficult topic to write about. I think that a lot of women that are writing about motherhood right now are really looking at the decision of whether or not to have children, and then if you do have children, how does that affect your work and your creativity? But not a lot of people have really looked at that situation where you have a child and then you leave it. So I think that this book really kind of addresses this like fear that is at the root of that like whether or not to have children question, which is like, what if this actually is not what I want? And yeah, I don't know what the answer is or anything like that, because it's something that I am also grappling with in my life. But yeah, it was just really thought-provoking. In the cases where she was able to, she also provided the perspectives of the children that were abandoned by their mothers. So there were some situations where the child, you know, felt very betrayed. There were some situations where the child, which like they're now adults, but like looking back, they were able to understand why their mother left. And yeah, I don't know, it was really, really intriguing. I really liked her writing style, and I would be interested in reading more from her. So thank you once again to NetGalley and W.W. Norton for the e-arc. And then we come to the one fiction book of the month, which is Our Evenings by Alan Hollinghurst. I read my paperback arc, not this big hardcover, but I ended up spilling coffee in my bag when I had the arc in the bag, and I got coffee all over it. So I was like, we're just gonna use the nice shiny new hardcover instead of the arc. But oh my gosh, I think that my hands would have like died trying to hold this. This book got 3 stars for me. It is something a little bit different than the fiction that I normally read. Obviously, for one, it's very big and long, which is not usually what I go for. 2, written by a man. Kind of crazy. Not something you see very often from me. But this book is a character study at its core, and it centers around Dave Nguyen, our narrator. He is a gay man of Burmese descent, and he's living in, you know, traditionally straight, white English society. We follow him throughout his life and his career as an actor. We kind of start whenever he is in school, and we see him through to his death. We look at his relationship with his mother. He has multiple different love interests throughout the course of the story. And then there is also a former classmate of his who ends up becoming a conservative politician and keeps kind of popping up in Dave's life. This book is really slow paced, and it spans such a long amount of time because it's this guy's entire life. But I thought that that was cool because it showed how British culture specifically kind of evolved from the 1960s up until the 2020s. Like this goes fully until the very recent past. There's a lot of longing and just this sense of displacement that our narrator Dave feels because of his identity and because he is so different from all of the people that he is moving through the world with. He gets involved in experimental theater, so he does kind of find some community within that, and I thought that that was a really interesting aspect of the story. And then I also really loved the character of his mother, Avril, who I don't really want to give anything away about her, but I thought that she was really kind of a captivating character and sort of a foil to David and his identity, and I really loved the juxtaposition between mother and son in this book. So I read this book throughout almost the entire month of November. This was my lunch break book, so I took it to work with me and read like 15 to 20 pages on my lunch break every day. And I can't tell if that system worked for or against this book. It is almost 500 pages long, so I don't, like, in my mind, I wanted to just chip away at it a little bit every day, because I was like, if I just focus on this book and only this book, I'm not going to be able to read as many books. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, I was like, let's just do a little bit every day and we'll get through it eventually. I don't think that this book needed to be as long as it was. I think that someone on Goodreads mentioned in their review, like, the first half is his time at school, and then the rest of his life is like in the second half. So I think some things could have been condensed a little bit. I thought that the prose was really beautiful, but there were some time jumps, like, because that second half is spanning so much time, we're kind of moving through time in ways that are a little bit unclear. There's new characters that just, here they are, we have no like context for them. So I had a bit of trouble keeping some of the characters straight as well. One thing with this too, though, the ending of it really got to me. I'm not gonna spoil it because I was so taken aback by it, was not expecting it at all. But I thought that it was a really culturally and socially relevant way to wrap up Dave's story. Overall, I just didn't feel as like drawn into this as I would want to be for a book of this length. I also I've never read any other books by Alan Hollinghurst. I was expecting him to also perhaps be of like Burmese descent or like mixed race or something, and then I looked him up and he is just a white man. So yeah, I kind of felt blindsided by that whenever I looked him up at the end of this reading experience, and I kind of felt like, oh, like, I wish I had just read something by someone of that background instead, you know? I don't know. It just, maybe I'm too entrenched in the autofiction thing, but I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting him to be who he was whenever I looked him up. I don't know. Shout out to Random House for sending me both the ARC and the finished copy of this. Highly, highly appreciate it. Oh my gosh. Okay. I don't know what number we're on. I've lost count, but our next book that we're going to talk about is I can never remember what the name of this is. As Consciousness is Harnessed to Flesh, Diaries 1964 to 1980 by Susan Sontag. If you saw my video with Claire, I talked about this there. I have been reading this since August. Oh man, I did not give this book a rating because I feel like it's tough to rate someone's diaries. That being said, this is the second volume of her diaries. The first volume is called Reborn, and it spans from like her late teenage years through to whenever this book starts. I don't remember how old she was in 1964, but I had very different experiences with both of those volumes, and I feel like my review of this book is actually more of a review of Reborn and why I liked Reborn more than this. So just bear with me here. When I was reading Reborn, I carried that book around with me nonstop. I read it in 9 days. Like, it's not as long as this one, but it was still pretty chunky. And it was like my daily driver during that time. Like, I was solely focused on that book. I was at the coffee shop with that book and a pencil, just like going to town, highlighting things. I even posted like an Instagram feed post of a bunch of different quotes from that book. I loved it that much. I did not have the same experience with As Consciousness is Harnessed to Flesh. It sat on my nightstand for 4 months, and I dipped in and out of it intermittently whenever I felt like it. So yeah, did not have that same love here that I did for Reborn, but I also, like, I feel like I can't give this a star rating because, like, these are her personal diaries and notebooks that weren't necessarily intended for publication. Like, it was just the detritus of her life. So how can I say, oh, it was bad, you know? I think in the first volume of her diaries, she was really engaged in the act of narrativizing her life. And this is something that I even see like when I'm journaling myself, where I think that a lot of the times we have this inclination to tell the story of our lives and the things that happened to us that day. And because of that, the first volume of Diaries was a much more linear reading experience. When we get to Susan in this book, she is really established in her career as a writer, and it turns from writing about her personal life into notes for essays and novels that she's planning to write, and really like referential things that she's looking into to support her work. So it was cool to kind of see her process, but I am also someone that has only read Sontag's diaries. I haven't completed any of her other like actual work that she's published. So I think that if you're familiar with her novels and her essays, then you might get along with this a lot better than I did. There are some parts in here where she does kind of go on these really long explorations into thoughts on herself or on her romantic relationships. And those portions of it, I was like, oh yeah, like I remember why I loved the first volume so much, because she is just like so painfully relatable at times. She's also really funny, hard on herself, but she's able to do it with a bit of humor. And I won't lie to you, I teared up reading some of the passages in here where she is getting more personal, because I just felt like I saw so much of myself in that, and I saw some of the situations in my life kind of reflected in her. So yeah, the first volume, Reborn, I would say if you're looking for some good writerly diary content, I would recommend that to anyone. I think that it was a really great study into like coming of age. This one, I would say if you're a Sontag completionist, you would probably get a lot out of this, but I am not a Sontag completionist, so it kind of just was a bit of a slog for me to get through at times, but I was very dedicated. I was like, I'm gonna finish this before the end of the year, and I did, so. And we have made it to our final book for the month. I feel like my notes document for this month was like extraordinarily long, but this actually didn't take as long as I thought it was going to. So let's talk about the book that I finished at 2 a.m. I guess technically this morning. The Right to Sex by Amia Srinivasan. The subtitle of this is Feminism in the 21st Century. So the reason why I finished this at 2 a.m. was because I fell asleep on my couch at like 9 p.m. and I woke up a few hours later and I was like, well, I feel like I just had a nap. I'm kind of re-energized. So I was like, let me finish my book. This is another really solid essay collection. I feel like all of the essays that I read this month were really great, really in line with the things that I'm interested in and enjoy thinking about. So I'm a happy camper. This was a 4-star read for me. I don't think that I mentioned that yet, but as it says in the subtitle here, Amia is tackling a bunch of different feminist issues. And I thought that this book was another really well-researched and well-written collection. Seems to be the theme here this month, and I'm very grateful for it. She focuses a lot on intersectionality and the way that race and class intersect with gender and sexuality. She looks at incels, which there's some information in the incel essay that I hadn't heard about before, and I was shocked. She also looks at professor-student relationships, the concept of carceralism and like punishment via the law and prisons. She talks about porn. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on YouTube. And yeah, I'm not gonna give you like all of my thoughts on all of those topics because I feel like that would just be too much and not the point of this video. But if you're interested in reading about those topics, I think that this is a great place to start. It was really easy to follow, really balanced, and I really liked how she took a look at a lot of concepts that kind of got their start in the 1970s with the women's liberation movement, and we almost kind of stagnated a little bit in our line of thinking, and she refreshes it and asks, like, how can we look at this in a way that takes into account the technology and the connectivity that we have in society today. I feel like she really does kind of live up to this subtitle as far as like talking about things in a 21st century context, because yeah, things are just a little bit different now than they were at the beginning of like the feminist movement. My one complaint with this book, and I posted about it on Goodreads, is that there's an essay in here called Coda, the Politics of Desire. And I don't know if I missed something. That could very well be the case, but that essay threw off the rhythm of this book for me. There's only 6 essays in here, and that coda was, I think, the 4th essay. So it was like right in the middle of the book, and like I said, I don't know if I missed something. The structure of it, instead of just being like a long form essay, it's like these numbered paragraph fragments, and she's like kind of addressing some of the criticisms that she got when she published the essay The Right to Sex online. But there was just something about the style of that my brain was like not computing. I don't know what it was, because the first 3 essays I was really able to get into the flow. I could follow all of her trains of thought, and same with the last 2 essays, but that one specifically just like, I don't know, it just threw me for a loop. It felt a little bit more disjointed, like it lacked clarity that all of the other essays had. So I was just kind of like, I don't know. But this was like a last minute addition into my nonfiction November lineup. I've been wanting to read this for a long time, at least a year now. I think I talked about it in like my last year's winter TBR or something like that, and I never got to it. So I was like, you know what, let's do it. I'm really glad that I did. Glad to have finally gotten to a book that I feel like is very important for these times. You know, looking at the next 4 years as the rights of women and other marginalized groups are going to be just dragged further into the murk. I feel like this is a very important book. So glad to have read it. So yeah, if I do end up finishing another book before the end of the month, I'll insert that clip of me talking about it here. If not, thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to me chat about these November reads. Let me know if you guys participated in Nonfiction November. Let me know what you're trying to get to before the end of the year. I'm really hoping that my reading year finishes strong in December. I plan on filming my winter TBR video at some point this weekend, and that'll be the video after this one, and I'm really excited about all of the books on that. So hopefully we have a good end of the year, we hit our goals, and we read some good books. So yeah, I will see you in that winter TBR video. Bye!